Anyways, well, my name is Daniel Castaneda. I work with an organization called OneOC. We actually recruit volunteers to different organizations, but ultimately what we specialize in is helping training services to nonprofits on how they can do better volunteer engagement and management, that sort of thing. But my personal background is that I've been working in nonprofit work for over 15 years. I've worked for an organization, a women's shelter. I was a volunteer manager there. I used to do after-school programming. I worked for a crisis center, food bank, you name it. I've kind of seen it all in terms of volunteers and trying to get good work done. You can go ahead and raise your hands. How many of you guys need more volunteers? Should see everybody's hand going up. Well, volunteers obviously are very important, and I'm going to be talking a little bit from this slide right here. You guys can see, I think it's your second page of your agenda. And if you look on page 3, it says volunteer management life cycle. So this is how I want to run this quick workshop, is that instead of you just listening to me, I think it would be really great for you guys to talk at your tables and just toss around ideas. Obviously, we're not going to solve the volunteer management situation in less than 35 minutes. But I'm hoping that we can at least start the conversation and just get to think about some things, and maybe you'll take away some nuggets. So here's what I would like to ask you. The first question would be, if you look down there where it says volunteer management life cycle, it says assess, plan, recruit, support and retain, and evaluate. And those are all steps in the process of what we call the volunteer management life cycle. What I want you guys to do for about 1 minute is talk at your table about what part of that life cycle do you all struggle with the most, your organization. What would you say it is? Would it be the planning aspect, the recruiting aspect, the support, the retaining, the evaluation? Which part? And I want you guys to take 2 minutes to discuss that right there on your table, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Sound good? All right, go on. So, out of a show of hands, how many people believe that their organization, they have a problem with assessing? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. Let's see, planning. Have a struggle with planning a little bit. Okay. Assessment, yeah, assessment. Well, that's good. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing an assessment to see where everyone's at. And sometimes in just trying to figure out how to serve, you got to know how to assess the situation. Who are we serving? What are their needs? What are their hiccups? What are their pitfalls? What are their roadblocks? That sort of thing, okay? What about recruiting? Show of hands if we see anybody quite a bit, right? It makes sense. What about support and retain? Support and retain, yes. There you go, retain. Enthusiastic hand up right there. And how about evaluate? Evaluate means more checking to see if you're meeting your metrics and your measures and that sort of thing. Okay. All right, what's the number one thing that we saw you just from looking around? Recruitment, right? Which brings me to the first thing. Thank you for asking that question. That is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to assess where it is that you all seem to be having most of the problems with, and that has to do with recruitment. And we'll get to that. Now that lets me know, as a workshop facilitator, what I need you guys to have more conversation about. But before we get there, let's kind of get to the planning aspect. Because like anything, you need to have a plan. And like a mentor one time told me, you're always supposed to put the compass before you put the clock to anything you do. The clock means you just gotta run and get it done. All of you guys, I'm pretty sure some of you guys are go-getters, so you just know what it's like to you just want to get action done. Totally get that. But we need to assess and look at the compass. There's like a difference between writing a list and there's a difference between prioritizing it. So planning is basically you doing that. It's planning things and some things to keep in mind. Budget or lack thereof. You need to have that in mind, right? Grant requirements or organizational mission. Your grant requirements, that's how we get funded. So we got to make sure that we're doing everything that's going to meet our grant requirements, right? It's not just about numbers, but it also is when you're trying to get more funding and you're trying to show that your work is actually making results. That is the world we have to juggle. The goodness of our heart and also showing the work, right? Stakeholders, your partners, funders, volunteers, you have to keep them in mind when doing the planning. How is this going to shake up their world? How is this going to impact them? And then mostly for planning, just have one. Just have one, because in reality, having one is half the game. And also, don't be married to it. You can change it. Be flexible. Be amiable about it. At any time, you may need to tweak it, change it around. But let's get to the spot where you guys really want to talk about, and that's recruitment. So let's talk a little bit with your tables again, since this is such a subject that all of you guys seem to have a struggle with. Talk about what are your struggles with recruitment. I'll give you guys about 2 to 3 minutes to talk it over with your table. So I know it's kind of hard to share here, but can somebody give me one thing that they struggle with? Just kind of like yell it out. Anybody want to share something? Communication. Communication to the volunteer or in general. Communication's a big piece. Absolutely. Say it again. Commitment. Oh my. Yes, absolutely. How come these volunteers just can't commit to doing this work all the time, right? It's just true though, right? Right. Or maybe just once a week, right? What else seems to be some struggle with recruitment? I heard something over there. Say it again. Age group. Yeah, age group. Yeah, because there could be some challenges. Some organizations seem to have a really good presence with college students, but we need to get our older active adults to be a part of that maybe, or maybe anybody, right? At this point, anybody, right? Go ahead. She said that it's the younger folks that actually don't want to do the volunteer, they want to get paid, right? They want to get paid. So that makes sense. That's definitely a hiccup when we're talking about recruitment. Anything else? Yeah, some people, right. So some people just want to get involved and get in there. Gotcha. Thank you. You saying? Mm, right. Right. So we would call that episodic volunteering, right? Where They come for seasons of time, right? I'm pretty sure you all don't have a hard time finding volunteers around Christmas, Thanksgiving, right? Those are the times you really start seeing the uptick in volunteers, but the other times, not so much, right? So it's the episodic volunteers, how do we get them to not just be able to come out here seasonal, right? Well, I'll share a couple things with you all, and then we can talk about it. Quantity versus quality. And these are questions you got to ask yourself about, do you want quality volunteers, because that may be less, or do you want quantity, meaning you just want warm bodies to be able to do the work? And you have to be honest with your organizational needs and what it is that you all can do with the budget that you have and the mission you have. Because if you need to have a certain amount of people to be able to distribute the food, work the kitchen, do that sort of thing, then maybe it is just quantity. If you want quality, meaning like you want someone who's gonna stay committed and stay there long term, well, that may mean less volunteers. And that means you need to be realistic with it. I once worked at an organization where I was working with the CEO, with the executive director, and she said she wanted to build up our volunteer base and do a 62-hour training, wanted them to go through over 6 weeks. I can just see some of your faces right now saying, yeah, that's not gonna work, right? Because she wanted them to go through the commitment of it. Because if you're gonna put in that much amount of work, you're not just gonna skip out, right? But then I had to communicate with her that if that's what we're gonna do, we're probably not gonna get 25 volunteers this season. We'll probably only get 5. But those 5, we can do something with them. And maybe we can plug them in to being volunteers to help out with our administration, our outreach, our data entry, our other areas within our organization where, I was just talking to an organization and they were telling me that they run lean. How many of you guys run very lean? You only have a few employees and the rest of it, yep. Right. So that would mean, don't y'all need help? Don't you need help in doing the data entry or maybe doing filing or other areas in your organization? I think that's a matter of you saying, can a volunteer do that? Can we ask a volunteer to do what we're asking the staff to do? That may mean more training, more time in, more commitment, more investment from you, but you got to pay for it one way or the other. You're either going to pay for it in the beginning or you're going to pay for it at the end when they leave. So it's just about asking yourself realistic questions. Do I want quantity or do I want quality? The other thing to think about, it takes the same amount of time and energy to connect with an organization, a Rotary Club, a group of people, a community group, as it takes to recruit individually volunteers. In other words, I'd rather put my time and energy connecting with Rotary clubs, women's clubs, other organizations, and really trying to find who that point of contact is and spend my time trying to connect with them than I would casting a big net and just saying, hey, anybody want to volunteer and everything? Because most people, when they volunteer, do they want to do it alone? They want to do it with other people. And now check this out. When you get buy-in from that group or Rotary Club or community org, you only have to send an email and contact information to one person, whoever their point of contact is. And now you can always be sending them stuff. That communication you were talking about, you can say, hey, by the way, we have this new drive coming up, we need a group of people here. Instead of you blasting out emails, which are fine to everyone, you need both. But start thinking more in terms of how do I get these groups of people to come instead of just how do I get these individual volunteers to come. And that means intentional recruiting. Intentional recruiting is just that. You checking to see what groups of people are geographically within your space. Like Googling, like Google Maps. And like going in there and seeing who are the groups, who can I connect with, who could I send an email to. I may send 20 emails to these orgs or these companies or these groups, and I may only get one. But that one could be like 20 or 30 people if you work it, right? So it's just in terms of looking at things a little bit differently. Let's go to support and retain, okay? We'll get back to the volunteer recruitment. So in terms of the commitment, have there a little simple formula that says action plus relationship equals volunteer engagement. And what that basically means is that if you've had volunteers come in to help out with your org and they stop coming, they volunteered, but they probably didn't engage. And that's a different piece because that involves a relationship. Relationship is a little different. When you think of relationship, yes, if you can go and connect with a volunteer and talk with them and know who they are by their first name, that'd be great. But you all have work to do too. So you don't have that time and that luxury to be there and meet every single volunteer and make sure they're okay and check in on them. I mean, we want to, obviously. But how do we make them have a relationship with the mission? Think about it like this. I've worked in nonprofit. You all have worked for the nonprofits for a while. We all agree we want to do something good. We get up every day and we feel good about doing a good service, right? How many of you guys have gotten up and didn't want to go to work? Did you know that the good work didn't make me want to get up out of the bed and still go out and fight the good fight? And you got paid for that job. That was your motivation. Now you're thinking about a volunteer who is not getting paid for it. It's important to remind them of the mission that they're doing. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how you could do it. Newsletters, conversations, thank you letters. Thank you. It's just, and this is what I'll say. Your points of contact with those first-time volunteers is the most critical. Being able to check with them and say, how did that day go? Thank you so much for doing that volunteer opportunity. But how did it go? Did everything go well? Great. That's great. That's great. Thank you for doing that. And that may seem like a lot of time and investment, but you got to catch them early. Because right away, that is your little window of time to really engaging them and hooking them into coming back and feeling appreciated and acknowledged, right? I would agree with that. I think there are some people who are wired to want to help, right? And it's just they volunteer for different organizations, right? There's got to be more than just a few out there, right? How do we find them? What do we maybe talking with that one who was super engaged and say, how did you come about that? What made you want to keep coming back and doing that? What's making you tick? That right there is a wealth of information that you can mine and you can use and you can be able to put towards finding intentional recruitment. Go ahead. Sorry, yes, I know. I'm like saying it like as if we're all in the room and you can hear. He was saying that a lot of the volunteers who come in to help out with his organization, they come and help out with quite a few, not just his. And he finds it that there are some people who are just wired to want to help and volunteer their time to different orgs. Absolutely. The last part that I want to talk about is of all the parts, and I know we just kind of rushed through all these pieces. Of all these parts that we discussed, what is the one area that you would like to learn more about? Out of the assessing, planning, recruitment, support, retain, evaluation, what would be the part that you would like to learn more about? And here's what I want you to think of. A lot of the questions that you were bringing up, guess what part of the process that is? The planning and the assessing. You all think, when I said which part is probably the most important, you all went to recruitment because you are people of action. You want to get things done, right? But what we're talking about in terms of ideas, who to target, that is all part of the planning process. And you have to think that way. Otherwise, you're just going to be putting out fires. It's like when I first got into nonprofit world, that's what they said. I'm putting out fires. I had a mentor one time tell me that she believes that we're building the plane as we're flying it. That's a visual. I was like, that's pretty much on target. Yeah. Building the plane as you're flying it. And you know what? That is the nature of the work. But it doesn't have to be all the time. And so when any of these areas that are coming like recruitment or management or retainment, guess what? We should go right back to the assessing and we should go right back into the planning, okay? So let's talk about, instead of one area, because we got 5 more minutes, come up with some ideas at the table of what you would like to do different in terms of volunteers, recruitment or management or retainment. What are some ideas? Throw some ideas out there to share them, because the answers are not up here. The answers are out there. So share it. Share one thing, just some ideas of what you would like to do to really get more volunteer engagement. Go ahead and take 2 minutes, and then we'll share out. I hope that this at least sparked some ideas and some thoughts. That's it. That's all I wanted to do. In the little bit of time we have, we're not going to come up with answers, but we're at least exchanging ideas and thinking a little differently. And that's really all we really want. When you come to workshops, you're not going to get all the answers. You just want something to kind of shift your thinking for a little bit and how you see volunteers' engagement, how to communicate a little bit differently, how to tap into whatever makes that volunteer want to volunteer to different organizations. Because what we're doing right now and this whole time, we've been doing this cycle, and we did it in about less than 35 minutes. We literally just did the assessing. We talked a little bit about the plan of recruitment, management, retaining, and if I had time, I'd have you all like, we did some evaluation too. I had you guys put your hands up. I was, there you go. That's concrete right there. And the last thing I will leave you with is that this cycle of volunteer management is not linear. It's not start from the beginning of the year and end it at the end of the year. It's always assessing. It's cyclical. It's continual. It's looking at things weekly, monthly, and checking to see this didn't work, this will work. So think of it like that. You know who does think of it like that? The for-profit businesses. That's exactly how they look at stuff. Yikes. Okay. So anyways, I will be around if you guys want to chat. I just want to thank you all for your time, for your participation. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for the work you guys do. I appreciate it.